right, so I'm here with Dr. Jose Antonio from Nova Southeastern University. He's also one of the co-founders of the International Society of Sports Nutrition. And Dr. Antonio, I wanted to ask you, what led to the series of studies on high-protein diets?
Yeah, the high-protein diets studies we've done, we've actually published now 4 of them. And the impetus for it actually came from a conversation I had with a bodybuilder, basically asking, how much protein do you eat? And seeing how much she consumed, I thought, has a study ever been done where you just got people who worked out, made them eat a very high amount of protein, meaning as high as, in this case, it was 4.4 grams per kilo, or roughly 2 grams per pound of body weight, and just see what happens. I mean, you're always hearing about how if you eat too much protein, you get fat. Well, the funny part is no one ever did this study. So we started out with a simple concept. Get trained people, eat a lot of protein, see what happens. And from that first study, we basically found out that really nothing happens. If one of the things you do in terms of overfeeding is just consume more protein, in terms of body composition and body weight, it's extremely difficult for you to gain body fat and body weight that way. So in a sense, overfeeding on protein is much different than overfeeding on carbs and fat.
Okay, perfect. Now, what have been some of the findings in these series of studies?
Yeah, we've had some interesting findings. Based on that first study where we just had people eat more protein, we actually followed it up with a lower dose, not really a much lower dose, but in this case, we went to a little over 3 grams per kilo. So remember, the first study was over 4 grams per kilo, second study was 3 grams per kilo, because we wanted to make the protein intake a lot more palatable and in a sense easier, because it's just hard to consume that much protein, that much food. But we also changed the training program so they followed more of a traditional bodybuilding program. And based on the second study, we found that the group that consumed more protein actually lost more fat mass than the group that consumed less. But both groups gained the same amount of lean body mass. So there might be 2 different things going on here. One, lean body mass increases may not be as responsive to higher protein feeding versus the loss of fat mass. Based on that study, we actually followed it up with a 2-part study that lasted about a year. And we took only the most highly trained male bodybuilders from the group from the prior 2 studies. And we basically repeated the same thing, again, high protein versus the regular intake. And again, they were being compared to themselves. It was a within subjects design. And we found that, again, we see the same pattern. When you start to increase protein intake, you tend to see a loss of fat mass. And then over the course of a year, in terms of health issues, in terms of kidney function, liver function, blood lipids, we found that there were no side effects, there was no harm in terms of consuming a pretty high protein diet. We're talking roughly 2.5 to 3.5 grams per kilo. So on average, they were about 3 grams per kilo for about a year.
And where can people go to find out more about your research and what you guys are doing at Nova Southeastern University?
Yeah, we I'm glad you mentioned that. We're actually conducting a 1-year study on trained women, looking at the effects of a higher protein intake on bone mineral density. Because as you know, one of the problems a lot of clinical nutritionists have with a high protein diet is it supposedly leaches calcium from your bones and therefore makes your bones weak. I don't believe it for a second. So we're in the middle of that study. And if you want more information on some of the things we do, we actually present our data every year at the International Society of Sports Nutrition Conference. And in fact, this year, we will be in Phoenix, Arizona, June 22 to 24. So if you love sports nutrition science, you got to come to the ISSN.
All right, Dr. Antonio, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.